The ones that I feel like don't have abundance and feel they've either lost relationships or aren't in a career path that's fulfilling to them, or for whatever reason aren't there. A common theme is having a fixed mindset. Hey, I either can do this or that. Or maybe that's a better way to put it. Getting into a mindset of and rather than or. So it's, hey, I can be a great son and a great friend. I can be a great businessman and a great husband. For me, it was either football or content. Finding a way to blend both if that's what lights up your heart. So, and rather than or, and getting away from like that fixed mindset, I think goes a long way in this topic.
Welcome to the Secrets to Abundant Living podcast. Your guide on this journey is Amy Sylvis. If you're ready for the secrets to an abundant life, hit that subscribe button now, and let's get started.
Welcome to the Secrets to Abundant Living podcast. I am your host, Amy Sylvis, and I have a treat for everyone today. I'd like to introduce you all, or maybe not introduce you. A lot of you probably know who Max Browne is, but we're so delighted to have him on the podcast. We were just talking about, got a few mutual friends in the USC scene. And I've seen Max play quarterback at USC, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But Max, please welcome. I'm so excited to have you here on the podcast today.
Great to be here. It feels like a long time coming. I know it feels like you're always on it with like every LinkedIn comment and Instagram every once in a while. Nothing gets past you. It feels like it's long overdue. We're syncing up on a longer form podcast.
Little stalkery. Yeah, I got it. I can read between those lines. I'm totally kidding.
I go more engagement. I go more, hey, hats off to you from a social media standpoint. But no, it's awesome.
Yeah, your story is, I know you hear this quite a bit, but your story is quite incredible. And at the podcast, we love to talk about, just how people make the most out of life and really find what abundance is. And so I'd love to kick it off. Can you tell folks shame on them if they don't know who you are, but can you tell us a little bit more about yourself for those who may not be familiar with you?
No, you're giving me too much credit. I was back at most of my time at USC. Assuming a lot of these listeners or maybe have a USC adjacent fandom there. But no, a big part of my story, I was the number one quarterback in the country coming out of high school. And that's, I'm 29, turning 30 in a couple of weeks. So even 12 years later, that still is a big part of my story, just transitioning from, to be honest, football not really working out in college and not living up to the expectations that the outside world had for me, and then navigating that in my 20s of, hey, what did that mean for my career and life and where I was living and identity and all that stuff, and in a great spot now. Fortunate enough to be a full-time content creator for to circle back on the social media reference earlier, and then I'm a sports broadcaster as well. So cover college football and NFL, but primarily college football for a living, call games for the CW. And it's a little bit of everything.
I love it. You brought that full circle very succinctly. So as we talk about, you kind of hit on this a little bit, but maybe where you are right now isn't exactly where you plan to be. Let's say, when you were in high school, getting ready to go into college. We talk about abundance again at the risk of being redundant, but how has that changed for you in terms of what that means in your life? And maybe as a 17 and 18-year-old, you weren't even thinking about what an abundant life is, but I'd love the listeners to really understand maybe that transformation in mindset, if you can give us a little look under the hood there.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I can't say that I was actively thinking about abundance as a high schooler, even though I was very much forward thinking and always kind of aware that, hey, football is going to come to an end. What does that mean for me post-football, work-wise, again, identity-wise, which is, I feel like a big term that always comes up with athletes, adjusting to that next phase of life. But I think for me, when I was playing football, I was very, there's one lane. It's the single focus. I'm quarterback Max, and this is the dream, and this is the path, and pouring everything towards getting to one goal, which for me was to be an NFL quarterback, versus I feel like getting out of the quarterback realm and adjusting to not being a player. I found abundance through just all the other lanes that life has to offer. And it doesn't have to be like literally, from 6 years old to 24 years old. My actions were about how can I be the best football player? Even hanging out with friends, it was like, oh, sweet, I get a break from football to hang out with friends. And then that's fun until the next training session. And just that intense mentality, which sounds crazy, but that's, a big part of when you are that big of a recruit. It kind of comes with the territory versus getting out of football. It's, hey, what's my relationship, or how do I find abundance in my career? How do I find abundance with friendships and abundance with my family members, especially with, I don't live as close with them, and abundance even, I'm like a sneaky US history buff a little bit, or at least an aspiring history buff there. Like I'll go deep into those types of lanes. And so just the different lanes that I think I wasn't as exposed to as a younger person that I've gotten more exposure to, and can find a lot of fulfillment in those different lanes.
What was that transition like though, Max, from being so singularly focused? Because clearly, I mean, you had to be, being in college football, being so highly ranked and recruited in high school. I mean, that's just not a part-time thing or a side hustle. I mean, that is all consuming. And I would imagine shifting gears, whether it was, you got injured at Pitt, or, try out for the NFL, didn't make it. Was it something that you did all on your own? Did you have support? What did that journey look like, if you don't mind touching on that?
For sure. Yeah, it was tough. And especially at a place like USC, where every scholarship football player that goes in there says, my goal is a first-round NFL draft pick, and I'll play in the NFL for 15 years and won't have to think about money or, a job, because it'll just naturally happen, because I'll crush it and I'm going to be the one that makes it, kind of thing. And it's also a culture where they kind of demonize the white-collar 9-to-5 job, right? It's, hey, I mean, you hear the famous Tom Brady line of like, I was, 6 months away from being an insurance salesman. And you kind of naturally demonize being an insurance salesman because it's an NFL quarterback, versus as I got older, it's like, wait a sec, I got some buddies in insurance and they got a great life and it's pretty fulfilling and they got a good structure and a good career. And it's just this, you almost have to rewire kind of how you approach life. And I think a big part of that, rest in peace, is that Mamba mentality though, where my generation of athlete was like, you got to be singular focused. And if you're not training 12 hours a day, or if you're paying attention in school, well, then that means you're not all the way in on football, like that kind of mentality, which I push back on that mentality because I've seen it work against a lot of my former teammates. And so to answer your question directly, it's a lot of rewiring the athletic mindset, but also seeing how can you translate some of the good sides of being an athlete and the positive discipline and work ethic and perspective and grit and all those into the next phase of life, which is the challenge. And I certainly had support, fortunate to have two parents that were grounded throughout my entire football journey. They never really got super high and drank the Kool-Aid when everyone was telling me that I was the best thing since sliced bread. And then they also didn't get too down when things were negative as well. So having that rock and that foundation was great, but it was no doubt a challenge, especially those like first really 3 years from, all right, you decide to hang up the cleats, to then 3 years later, while a lot of your peers are still playing in the NFL. So it's like, man, I wish I was in their shoes kind of stuff. All those thoughts that I think, people could probably relate to come up, but it does get easier in time.
Wow. Yeah. Just, but obviously I'm some suburban, white lady out here, just a college football fan, but trying to put myself in your shoes, just in what that transition must have been like. But it's clear. I mean, I'm not the first person to tell you this, but you're very talented at what you're doing now. How much of those skills, of that singular focus, maybe even the network, the connections, the experience, how much is all of that fed into the great things that you're doing now?
Yeah. And it's obviously had a huge role. I mean, I was like the teenager that would watch 12 hours of NFL Network, every day, or not every day, but the 6 hours of NFL Network coming home from school. So I've always loved football. So the fact that now I'm, almost 30, married, and being able to cover the game that I love for a living is incredible. And I've been fortunate enough to kind of find the niche of, I like the content aspect and the business aspect and a little bit like the entrepreneurial spirit, with also, high level X's and O's football talk that I'm able to incorporate, and then some of the personality stuff as well. So it's definitely translated. And even from being on camera or on a mic, I always think back to the days where, you had tough press conferences, or like I didn't get the starting job, or like the having to address the press after a loss or something like that. Those experiences certainly help, just being in front of the public in general.
Yeah, that makes sense. Speaking of being a content creator, do you feel like you've always been able to be yourself? Was that something you kind of evolved into? Because I find you quite humorous. I still use the term five head to refer to my large forehead that I learned.
Oh, you got nothing. If people are seeing this on camera, I got it way worse.
But is that something that, because I imagine in college football, you get training on how to talk to people, and, the world was quite different in, 2015, 2016 than, here in 2025, just in terms of content creation and all of that. But have you always been able to be yourself? Or is that something you evolved into? What's that been like?
Yeah, I definitely evolved into it. I'll never forget one of our first meetings at USC. Like basically Lane Kiffin had like a media training PowerPoint, and it was about basically like kind of hiding your your life, which that was kind of the norm in 2013, 14. It was like,
wow,
private profiles, be careful what you say in your post, because you never know what can get you in trouble kind of thing. Versus nowadays with the NIL, it couldn't be more opposite. And I think that growth in society is the same growth and trajectory that I took as well. And I do think, and it's funny, every once in a while I'll get the question of like, hey, what's the biggest advantage of being a bust? A bust means someone who like didn't live up to expectations, which is obviously a tough word. And I'm just get uncomfortable with that, which I understand. But like one of the advantages is I think my, like football not working out was like my biggest fear growing up. And that's why, I was definitely a guy that was like motivated by the fear of failure a little bit. But then when that happened, and then you get on the other side, I do think it lightened me up to the point where it's like, dude, if I can get through that, who cares if people think I have a five head? Who cares if people think I have this or that, or, whatever, or like, who cares if this post, be a little, I'm pretty mindful of being cringy a little bit, but like if that post is a little outside of the realm that I might have more anxiety or be insecure around that. And I do think I don't have that in large part because of how my playing career played out, which in a weird way, I guess, grateful for that.
I love that you highlight talking about some of the benefits of things not working out, because that's just part of being a human, right? I mean, we can decide to have our trajectory. I don't know how much you know about my story. My listeners have heard a bit. I was born with a genetic illness called cystic fibrosis. I was supposed to live to be 8 or 9 years old. I'm 43. I had to medically retire at age 34. It was, you mentioned kind of the thing that you feared the most. I was absolutely devastated. I loved what I did. I was just crushed. But the benefits that came out of it, the golden handcuffs that would have never been broken had I not left corporate America and, made another transition. This isn't about me, but I guess I appreciate the example that you set of, hey, this is what I really wanted, or I thought was really, the only thing that would make me happy, or the only abundance I could have in my life. But, now you get to do other things. And I would imagine
that's incredible. And it's cool too, because you can just hear on your tone that like, it's not just saying that just to say it. Like, I think sometimes people can kind of like roll their eye in your situations, much more, intense than mine. But like, I think sometimes people can kind of roll their eyes subconsciously of like, oh, you're just trying to look on the bright side, or like, I'm not wired that way. Like, I can't just always be positive. Well, it's not just like a gimmick thing. It's like genuinely, hey, if you were a third party, like assessing the trajectory of our lives, or I'll speak to myself, just like my life, you'd be like, no, that one experience, it sucked from a football lens, but there also is objective positives that came off of it that, incorporated in my life today.
You mentioned Lane Kiffin. That image is so funny to me about putting together your own personality, watching him on Twitter now, or X. He's funny.
Couldn't be more different. Couldn't be more different. I give him, great. I've mentioned that a couple times on air because I called his game week 3 this past season. And
it's great.
I mean, total one. He literally got criticized. The number one criticism with him when he left USC was that he like wasn't socially dynamic to like handle USC donors and press and a locker room and all that, in addition to the wins and losses, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But then now, literally 10 years later, he is the most socially dynamic head coach in college football, which is like crazy to think about. And good on him, I guess.
Best friend in my head. Not going to lie. He's so funny.
Love it.
That's great. That's amazing. So we get, I mean, you mentioned at the beginning, maybe some USC fans or, adjacent folks that listen to the podcast, but we actually have a pretty wide variety of people that listen, some people that are in college, other people that are retirees. So kind of given that diversity, I'm just wondering and you've touched on this a little bit, but what advice would you give to somebody who maybe their biggest fear came true, career-wise, personally, whatever that looks like? If they came to you and said, Max, I'm really in it, how should I get through this? What advice would you give?
Yeah, I would say, where my head goes right away is just having the perspective to understand that a negative chapter, even if it is health related, like that can just be the story for one chapter. And it's okay to have like a negative one chapter, but it doesn't have to be every chapter of your life story book for the rest of time. And I think I told myself this story, even though I knew in my brain this wasn't the case, but my heart, felt this full force of like this storyline that I told myself of, hey, if I don't make it to the NFL or my football career doesn't work out, that I'll just live this miserable life and this cloud of just like failure and being someone who doesn't live up to expectations will just carry me through the rest of my life. Again, my brain knew that was kind of crazy, but my heart as a 18, 19, 20, all the way to like 24 years old, that's what I felt. And I think having the perspective or maybe just the peace of mind to know that those negative things, again, the worst case scenario thing doesn't have to live with you forever. And I also think, when I look at, some of my peers that had either similar situations or just in general of, having to pivot and adjust in life, the ones that are more optimistic than pessimistic, it sounds so basic, but there is a clear through line of the people that are, hey, something bad happens, they stay optimistic. How can this be a challenge? Life has a funny way of kind of finding a new successful path for them versus the people that and even if it is, terrible stuff, the pessimistic, sky's falling, this sucks, and you kind of live in that, I would just push people. And again, I know it's, especially if you're going through it, that's easier said than done. But if you've had the time to kind of grieve that experience, not sticking with that pessimism, even if there may be an underlying truth to what you're saying, it's not going to benefit you in any way. So I'd encourage you to kind of push out of that.
I love it. Yeah. The rainbows and unicorns might feel a little tough when you're in it, but there truly is always something that can be found that is good that comes from it. And, the support system and yeah, I think hearing stories like yours, we've had a lot of really encouraging people on the podcast. So we'd love to be able to promote that mindset as well. Have you ever thought about having multiple streams of income? Instead of relying on just one stream of income where you're trading your time for money, how would you like to free up more of your time and live a more abundant life? As a listener of the show, you're invited to attend one of our upcoming trainings where I'll give you an inside look into how you can add passive income and get all the other perks of recession-resistant real estate investing without the headaches of being a landlord. We'll also be sharing some hidden mistakes to avoid and the criteria I personally look for when evaluating potential investment opportunities. To reserve your seat for free, go to sylviscapital.com/webinar. Again, that special link to reserve your seat for free is sylviscapital.com/webinar. I look forward to seeing you on the training. And now back to the show. So what's next for you? What do you want for more abundance in your life? What are you and Vic thinking about, either together or just you, or what's next?
I saw that question in the rundown. It got me thinking. Yeah. That's the one I was like, where do I want more abundance? Because it's funny, I'm at a stage in my life where I feel like I finally have settled into what my career is. And I've been, so much of my 20s was career focused, figuring out what that was. I had a few career pivots along the way. So it's cool that we're doing this podcast like in January 2025, because it really feels like the first month where I've, settled into that. I left my day job back in August of last year. So it's been, a sense of newness there. But when I saw that question, I go to just family and relationships, more abundance there. And the reason being is I'm the youngest of 4 boys. My oldest brother, same parents. My oldest brother is 12 years older than me. So as we get older, just naturally life, you just kind of drift, and not that anyone's bad or has poor intentions or anything like that, but it just naturally happens that way. And I don't want that to be the case. And so trying to make it a priority to invest in those relationships, show up for those relationships and find abundance there. And then the same thing on friendships too. Again, I've mentioned this a couple times, but turning 30, right? Friends are starting to have kids, starting to get married, much more difficult to hold on to friendships. But I think that's a huge vulnerability for males, especially as you age, of having male friendships. Like when I look at people that are, much more older, and it's easy to lose out on that. And it's unfortunately more common than not, just observing how people, proceed in their life, that is something that, again, want to continue to invest in that, show up in that, say yes to the coffee here, or reach out when you think of them in a text there. And I think life has a funny way of, even those little touch points, they start to, accumulate. And then to bring it back to your question, I do think that allows you to have abundance at a future stage of life when those relationships don't wean off.
Incredible foresight. That's, yeah. And to your point, a lot of things in life don't have to be these big grand pivots or gestures. Sometimes these small, consistent investments, like you said, just saying yes to something or sending over a text that's really all it takes to maintain that connection.
I got to get thinking though. You asked about Vic and I, in a marriage abundance. I'm going on year 3, or I guess we're 2.5 years married. So yeah, I'll take any, if there's been other guests that have good insight there, I'm all ears.
As a woman who's been married for how long? Maybe 7.5 years now. It sounds like how you're thinking about relationships will probably easily translate into your marriage and investing in that. So I think you're on a great track for whatever.
I hope so. I'm just trying to hold up my end of the bargain. My wife's even more thoughtful than me. So trying to keep up.
That's awesome. That's wonderful. Well, what parting words, Max, is there anything I didn't touch on? Anything that you think the audience any Max wisdom, hashtag Max Browne wisdom we can live with?
Maximisms. Yeah. Maximisms. I guess another thing, just when I was thinking about, again, this like abundance topic and whatnot, is I mentioned the optimism versus the pessimism, but I also think there's like, and maybe it's literally the abundance mindset, but not having a fixed mindset on, it's like when I assess, either my life or, people around me, the ones that I feel like from my seat don't have abundance and feel they've either lost relationships or aren't in a career path that's fulfilling to them, or, for whatever reason aren't there. I feel like a common theme is like having a fixed mindset. It's that, hey, I either can do this or that, or maybe that's a better way to put it. The mindset of getting into a mindset of and rather than or. So it's, hey, I can be a great son and a great friend. I can be a great businessman and a great, husband. Not, hey, it's one or the other. It's career or relationships, right? It's, for me, it was either football or content, finding a way to blend both, if that's what lights up your heart. So I only say that because that kind of mindset kept coming up when I was thinking about this and seeing some of the questions and the overall topic of abundance, of like, because I've never been asked these questions, like this certain topic of abundance, like how would I answer those things? And that, and rather than or, and getting away from like that fixed mindset, I think goes a long way in this topic.
Beautiful. And that serves, whether it's career, whether it's relationships, whether it's health. I mean, I think that is so wise. I think society doesn't necessarily cultivate that, right? I mean, a lot of us spend time on social media, highlights extreme views or, opposition rather than, coming together or thinking through things in a more nuanced way, maybe. So we talk a lot on the podcast about the reticular activating system. This is where the big brain comes in. But the fact that our brain takes in so much information, but very little of it rises to the level of our consciousness where we're actually aware of it. So if we have that abundance mindset, we can really point ourselves and make sure our brain takes in the information that serves us. Sounds a little wild, but it's kind of like if you're looking to buy a car and all of a sudden you see that car everywhere. That car's not popping up everywhere just because you're thinking about it. It's just the fact that your brain's recognizing it. So
I like that. Anyway. I like that. I'm gonna take that with me. Love it.
Reticular activating system. Yeah, we nerd out on occasion. Max, this was such a pleasure. Thank you so much. I know I kept pinging you and you were very patient and kind as I tried to get you on the podcast. So thank you again for taking the time. And I know our listeners are really grateful to be able to get to know you and be inspired by your story.
For sure. Thanks for having me on. This was awesome. And again, questions that I rarely ever get. So it's fun to tap into something new. Yeah, thanks.
Very cool. Oh, and shout out to Professor David Blasco for being our mutual friend and giving me the courage to reach out to you.
Man, that's friends with everyone. Great dude. And yeah, glad it worked out.
Amazing. Thanks again, Max. We really appreciate you. Am I allowed to tell you fight on?
Fight on. Always. Yeah, I got the helmet right there.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks again.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Secrets to Abundant Living podcast. We hope you found inspiration and valuable insights that will empower you on your journey towards abundance. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback means the world to us, and it helps others discover the secrets to an abundant life too. Stay connected with us on LinkedIn, Amy Sylvis. Keep striving for your goals, nurturing your relationships, and embracing the adventure